Joy's Way by Dr. Brugh Joy. Chapter 6, 6 Quantum Leaps. In my transformational process, there have been 6 quantum leaps, experiential insights that have radically and suddenly altered my perception of reality. As I use the expression here, a quantum leap is a jump from one level of realization to another without passing through an intervening development to arrive at new awareness. Up to a certain point in time, you hold one set of beliefs. In the next instance, you experience a whole new perspective. In any such case, you cannot comprehend the validity of the new experience unless you relinquish an idea or many ideas that you have held till then. In my case, it took over 30 years to establish the foundation on which these leaps in awareness could take place. All of them were slow in brewing, were accelerated by the process of meditation, and were infused with a sense of expansion and deeper truth about the manifest plane and its relationship to the psyche and to the spirit. For me, the 6 major insights were, and he lists them here. Number 1, the relativity of all reality and the importance of state-bound consciousness. Number 2, the differentiation of sequential experiences from simultaneous experiences and the real meaning of the now moment. 3, the breakdown of skin-bound consciousness. Number 4, the realization of the difference between thought forms and essences. Number 5, the resolution of the death space. And number 6, the experience of unconditional love. This chapter is a distillation of the innumerable experiences and contemplations that brought about these insights. Relative reality. Albert Einstein had the genius to take the obvious and validate it with mathematics. Without him, people might have gone on forever denying in their intellects what they had known for eons in their lives. 2 individuals observing the same event from 2 different points in space do not experience the same reality. Going even further than Einstein, I would state that 2 people who observe the same event from the same point of view in space at the same point in time, if it were physically possible, would not experience the same reality. Why? Because each person's focus of awareness is different, so that no 2 people can possibly draw the same conclusions. Each individual's consciousness is unique, not only in historical background, but also in the kind and degree of its filtration. Experiences of the manifest plane are always and can only be relative to the perspective of the viewer. There are, therefore, as many different realities occurring simultaneously as there are foci of awareness. In regard to any event, there are as many realities as there are observers, and each reality is equally valid. I usually illustrate this point by inscribing in space the largest circle it is possible to draw with my finger. That circle could conceivably include the entire universe, but for the moment let's limit it to a circle with a radius as long as my arm. Now, put a dot, the tiniest of dots, anywhere in that circle. We let the space within the circle symbolically represent your total possible awareness, while this little dot represents your awareness in any given moment. Now, using the same radius, transform that circle into a sphere, and the dot into a tiny sphere. And now we have a model in 3-dimensional reality. Now imagine, inside this larger sphere, many possible spheres, the size of marbles, representing each and every possible state of awareness. The tiny dot sphere representing your momentary outer awareness, can go into any one of these marble-sized spheres. The first such sphere you might enter might be labeled conditioned ideas about reality. And while you're in this space, everything fits in with that label, and nothing contradicts it. You next enter a sphere labeled neurotic state, with the subtitle fear of rejection. All reality you perceive from this focus of awareness confirms this perspective. You are an object to be rejected, and nothing denies it. Let's say that your tiny sphere of awareness enters a marble-sized sphere called depression. No matter what you perceive there, everything feels and looks bleak and dark, and despair and pain get worse and worse, and so on. Through as many labels as you can imagine, the ordinary human awareness goes through just such a process, but in a more complex way, because memory is a dimension always superimposed on the moment's experience, so that the experience of the present moment is altered even further. The process of enlightenment is the process of acquiring the ability to expand that tiny sphere of awareness to include more and more of the marble-sized spheres, and thereby to include a larger portion of the large sphere. And when you reach a point where your awareness at any given moment includes the entire larger sphere, you have achieved illumination. Many individuals have entered a space labeled expanded awareness and called the experience enlightenment. But because their individual focus was not expanded, they have not been truly enlightened. They have, it is true, had a peak experience in spaces not easily penetrated by the aware focus. But their real task still before them is to expand their awareness, to encompass the peak experience space and all others, all in the same moment. A peak experience is far from enlightenment. The more inclusive an individual's aware consciousness, the greater his or her soul development. I also illustrate relative reality with the idea of a series of slides. First is the perspective of the earth as viewed from the ground. One could get lost trying to grasp the myriad details of Los Angeles, even spend a lifetime or two studying its aspects. To make the project more difficult, it is constantly changing, with new roads, buildings added, old roads removed, and so on. One's entire focus of awareness could be spent in this activity, and not even get into the neighboring Southern California areas, or to San Francisco, New Delhi, or Paris. This situation is analogous to being stuck in a psychological set or fixation of awareness. While you're in it, nothing is going to make you believe that there is another possibility of experience. Your focus on a problem or a situation is so close that you cannot see anything outside of it. In fact, our laws of relativity would state that the closer you are to an object, whether material or psychological, the larger and more vast it will be. Not seem, but be. In fact, your focus of awareness, if your focus of awareness were to penetrate a single room, that atom would take on the experience and the dimension of the entire solar system. Your problems get bigger when you focus on them. The next few slides would show the Earth from an orbiting satellite. Not only can you see how far vaster a portion of the whole, but the experience of the ground is radically altered. Roadways in and out of cities can be seen. The relationship of one city to another can be easily grasped. Mountains, rivers, oceans, lakes, cities, roads, and other topological features now appear in relationship to one another. Egypt from the air and Egypt from the ground are two different experiences. The former is a river of green meandering through a vast desert, while the latter is a mass of teeming towns and village farms extending on either side of a large muddy river. The next slides would show the Earth as seen from 100,000 miles away, progressively farther and farther, and eventually show the Earth from the Moon. And from there, it is staggering to conceive of the entire history of mankind, up to and including this very moment's developments, as taking place on that small, multicolored globe. Billions of people are swarming over the planet, and not one can be seen from this perspective. And in brackets he says, and where are your problems now? We next view slides of the Moon as seen from its surface. Then we go on to Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And finally, we move out into the galaxy and beyond. From this perspective, all that remains of Earth and the total of human endeavor isn't even perceptible to the eye, but infinite other perceptions and experiences in awareness are, including the possibility of focusing on another sun with its planets and life forms, and perhaps more advanced than ours. There are billions of suns just in our own galaxy. More than 100 million of them are thought to have planetary solar systems, similar to our own. Since there are billions of galaxies, the probability of life in the known universe is high. While light from our own star, the Sun, reaches us in about 8.3 minutes, light from the nearest star outside the solar system takes 4.3 years. The farther we get away from these distant events that we perceive, up to perhaps 10 billion years for stars at the farthest observable reaches of space. As long as we can perceive and conceive only in linear models, it will be more than 4 years before we can know that anything major has happened at the nearest star in our own galaxy. Fortunately, there are alternatives to linear models, and I will demonstrate in the sections on simultaneity. Most important, however, is that a change of perspective in thought actually changes. Most important, however, is that a change of perspective in thought changes actual time and actual physical relationships. This suggestion may be a clue as to how a change in attitude about a disease process can influence the course of that disease process. From all that has been said, we may even infer that the disease process may be affected not only by changes of attitude in the patient, but also by changes of attitude of the physician, the healer, therapist, or anyone else who is part of the patient's consciousness. We are beings of undetermined number of dimensions, exploring the third and fourth dimensions. These 3 or 4 dimensions are a school of gods in which we learn in slow motion the consequences of thought. This conception of us and our world is diametrically opposed to the more common idea that we are third and fourth dimensional beings who are trying in vain to comprehend the N dimensions of reality. Another example of relative reality, which we have already considered, is the interpretation of tarot cards. Here again, the perspective determines creates what one sees. In a group of 20 or so people, I usually demonstrate this phenomena by having one individual name the card he or she most dislikes. The other participants then find the same card in their own decks and study it for a few minutes. After the person who selected the cards gives his or her interpretation of it, I ask the group, how many of you saw the card change as the interpretation was given? Up go the hands. Most of the people always see their own initial perspective of the card, and therefore their experience of it change into something similar to what the first person reported seeing. To emphasize this relativity, I ask each person to relate what he or she first saw in the card, and with each sharing, the card seems to change magically for all of them. This experience is only the beginning of understanding how perspective determines what one experiences, and 20 people encounter only the bare possibilities contained in just one card. In teaching psychotherapeutic work, I extend this relativity concept to show the importance of seeing another's perspective, that is, the way the individual is configuring the problem or problems. This perspective is then put into relationship to the therapist's various perspectives, which hold the potential resolution. When the problems are projected onto the tarot cards, the client has the opportunity to observe how differently the card appears when the therapist presents alternative views. In my psychotherapeutic work, I do not just give options to the clients. My fundamental purpose is to enable the clients to learn to see options for themselves. 2 personal examples demonstrate how my attitudinal shifts changed my perception of events. In the first 17-day conference at Sky High Ranch, which I presented in September 1975, I played for the group an English translation of the record of Bhagavad Gita, a 25-year-old Hindu epic poem from India. On hearing it, I was enraptured, truly ecstatic, and so I played the identical record again on the conference of January 1976. This time, I was enraged by what I heard. I was angry over almost every statement in it. Then, during one of those moments of anger, I suddenly realized what was going on. I brought the September experience back to my mind. How could I, in a past moment, have experienced this record as one of the most beautiful, and in this moment barely tolerated? And then it dawned on me, since the poem was innocent and the record the same, something must have happened inside me to produce the second diametrically opposite response. When I shifted my focus of awareness to a heightened state, I again experienced the harmony of the poem. When the record was over, most of the members of the group said they detested it and were angered by it. In them, its religious associations had stirred up deep-seated resentment. I experienced a sudden insight into the power of group consciousness. Even though all the participants had been lying quietly on the floor, listening to the record, I had been somehow swept up in their unspoken emotional responses. As some participants with powerful energy fields reacted in anger, the rest of the group was inducted into the same emotional perspective, and I was caught up by it too until I realized what was happening and, enabled by my training, blocked the induction. The group's mood was depressed, resentful, and angry. I then asked the participants to form a circle and shift their awareness to unconditional love. 2 minutes after they did so, the energy of the group and all the energy in the room was transmuted into harmony. It was a profound experience, especially for me, because I knew from experience that people usually take hours or days to work through feelings of anger and resentment. Now, having listened to that record at least 6 times, I have responded in so many different ways that I wonder whether I shall ever hear what it is actually saying, and whether what it is saying is even the point. The second example to demonstrate the consequences of attitudinal shift concerns my feelings about a facial asymmetry. One of my ears is noticeably lower than the other, and so is one of my eyes. I became aware of this imbalance at about the age of 10, and to make it less obvious, I had learned to tilt my head in a certain way and to comb my hair to minimize the apparent disproportion. Still, it was almost intolerable to my ego that this disharmony existed. And then for several years, several years ago, I came across an article that pointed out that mystics often have distortions of their face. And when I looked again in the mirror, I said, it's not distorted enough. My ego needs had completely shifted my perspective to a new behavior and feeling. The phenomena of state-bound consciousness is closely connected to relative reality. As you already know, ordinary consciousness is only one of many possibilities. It is primarily a trained state of mind, a conditioned state. We have been told how and what to think, for the most part how to act. Ordinary consciousness is the one that perceives Los Angeles as a city, whereas you can see it from another state of consciousness. You can't see where it begins or ends, and therefore whether it exists. As a matter of fact, it doesn't exist, really. It exists only at a certain level of consciousness. No forms of life but the human have any idea that Los Angeles exists. Your ordinary awareness has vast experience and vast information available to it about the conditioned level, albeit the information may be compartmentalized within the normal or conventional states of consciousness. The term state-bound consciousness means that the information known to one perspective or state of consciousness is bound to that particular perspective or state of awareness and is generally unavailable to other perspectives or states. When we dream at night, our consciousness is obviously in a different state from its ordinary waking state. Sometimes we can bring some of the dream experience back to the outer state of awareness, but for the most part, dream experiences are bound to the dream state and are unavailable to the outer mind. As a byproduct of meditation, however, one can develop the ability to shift from one state to another and thus recapture dream experiences in all their detail. This phenomenon is one of several reasons why I consider meditation to be empowering. It enables the mind to go into any state of consciousness and retrieve information that ordinarily can be experienced only at that level. Charles Tart of the University of California at Davis has devoted much of his energies to teaching and writing about the binding of information to the level in which it is first experienced. In one experiment, not by Tart, medical students drank alcohol until they were drunk, and then they were trained. When they sobered up, they were tested on what they had learned while they were drunk. They did poorly, but when the experimenters got them drunk again and tested them while they were drunk, the students performed much better on the same material. Much of the information was entirely unavailable to them when they were sober. Something similar occurs when individuals enter high states of consciousness through meditation, or when the gift of channeling is achieved and the wisdom of information received transcends ordinary awareness. When individuals return to ordinary awareness, most of the information is lost to the outer mind. Such is the case with many inspired teachers. When they are in stream, in quotes, in stream, a term that denotes a shift to a more expanded awareness, they verbalize or channel information from that state of experience. If the stream of consciousness is broken, as by questions from students or by some other action, the connection is disrupted and the teacher's focus of consciousness shifts, and the experiences of another level are lost, at least momentarily. The teacher may not even be able to tell the student what he or she was discussing. A tape recording, however, can sometimes recapture what was experienced in the higher state, and the master teacher can return at will to that state when the information is bound and rechannel it. Inspired writers demonstrate the same phenomena. When they reread their creative writing several days later, they often find that what they wrote seems not to be of themselves, as if it would be impossible for them to reproduce a similar level of writing from the ordinary normal state. And of course, what they're experiencing is the truth. The original material is not available to their normal focus of awareness. Something similar happens almost universally to participants in conferences at Sky High Ranch. When they return home, they find it almost impossible to tell other people what has happened to them. In the home reality, the ranch experience takes on a dreamlike quality. It was so clear and profound while I was at the ranch, they tell me. And then when they see it later, they tell me when they see me later, but words would dry up in my mouth when I attempted to share what I had experienced. Again, we are dealing with state-bound consciousness. While we are at the ranch, conference participants are not in ordinary states of awareness. Most of these experiences are bound to their levels of consciousness at the ranch and are not fully available to them when they return to the ordinary outer states where most of their friends and family exist. Some participants have actually rejected later what they validly experienced at the ranch. State-bound consciousness also explains the mechanism of the crash or depression that often follows prolonged higher states of experience. The important thing to do in such cases is not to bring people back to ordinary reality, but to teach them how to re-enter the expanded levels, to recapture and create further on these levels. And again, all is relative because, as you already know, I consider the expanded states of beingness, the natural ones, and the normal ones, profoundly abnormal. The choice of which state to experience life in is always up to the individual. Invariably, one of the participants will say, "I get it, but I want some hope that I can bring it to my everyday life." My response is always the same. It is possible to blend the higher dimension with the outer levels of awareness, but if one is unwilling to let go of the rigid structure of that outer everyday life, but not if one is unwilling to let go of the rigid structure of that outer everyday life. If one is going to bring experiences through from other levels, one's outer reality must accommodate both. To break free of conditioned states, the belief structure must change. If that possibility seems threatening, then one should avoid the pathways into expanded awareness. My clear intention is to break down the partitions that compartmentalize our experience of reality. Your choice is your own. At the ranch, I warn each participant, both in a letter a month before the conference and in person during the first 5 days of the conference, that the exploration of higher states of consciousness can be painful and difficult. Like riding a gigantic roller coaster, none of them will return to their homes and professional lives unchanged. Each participant has the choice of remaining or leaving. When the group has committed itself, I begin to intensify the group interaction. For each individual, a window of consciousness begins to open. The participants actually open the window themselves, and near the end of the 2 weeks, they gradually close that window as they begin to focus their attention on the future event of returning home. In summary, no creative idea or experience is ever lost. A shift in perspective and state of consciousness only makes it seem to disappear. The practice of meditation teaches us how to change levels of consciousness so that eventually we can enter any state of consciousness at will, and the creative idea or experience shall be fully recovered.